Hello everyone, welcome to a new video of your Polyglot Academy. Today it's lesson 41 and we're going to talk about genitive prepositions, so let's start. Now, what are genitive prepositions? Genitive prepositions are simply prepositions that need a declination of the genitive case. So I think it was in lesson 20 something we talked about dative prepositions. Those were prepositions which always needed a dative case after them. In this case, we always need a genitive case. So let's start. Now, first we're going to talk about causal prepositions, and the first one we're going to talk about is aufgrund. Aufgrund means because of or based on. And here you can see an example. Aufgrund des schlechten Wetters bleiben wir zu Hause. Because of the bad weather, we're staying at home. In this case, you can see the meaning of aufgrund, which is because of, and it is very clear that we have a genitive declination after the preposition aufgrund. Normally, we would have das schlechte Wetter, but because we have to decline to the genitive case, we're going to say aufgrund des schlechten Wetters. So it is very important that you learn the table we talked about in lesson 40, the table with the possible declinations of the dative case. This is very important to remember. Following on, here's another preposition, wegen, which also means because of. And here's an example. Wegen des Verkehrs kam zu spät. Because of the traffic, he was late. In this case, we can see the causal preposition wegen, which means because of, and the declination to the genitive case. So we have des Verkehrs. The last causal preposition we're going to talk about is infolge, which means as a result of. And here's an example. Infolge des Unfalls war die Straße gesperrt. As a result of the accident, the road was closed. First, we have the causal preposition infolge, which means as a result of, and then the genitive case right after that. So we're going to have infolge des Unfalls. Now let's talk about some temporal prepositions, so prepositions which have something to do with the time. First, we have anlässlich, which means on the occasion of. And here's an example. Anlässlich des Jubiläums gab es eine Feier. On the occasion of the anniversary, there was a celebration. First, we have the temporal preposition anlässlich, which means on the occasion of. And then right after that, we can see the genitive case. Furthermore, während, which means during. And here's an example with während. Während des Films war sehr still. During the movie, it was very quiet. The sentence is starting with the temporal preposition während, which means during, and it is followed right away by the genitive case, which is highlighted in yellow. Now, während, out of all the prepositions we're going to talk about today, I think während is probably the most important one, so check it out and remember it. Following on, we're going to talk about prepositions that propose an alternative in comparison to something else. In this case, we have anstelle or statt, which both mean instead of. And here's an example with anstelle. Anstelle des Direktors sprach sein Stellvertreter. Instead of the director, his deputy spoke. In this case, we can see the preposition instead of, anstelle, which is followed by the genitive des Direktors. Now, here's an example of the Stadt, which has the same meaning as anstelle. Statt eines Buches kaufte er ein Magazin. Instead of a book, he bought a magazine. First, we have statt, which means instead of, and it is right away followed by the genitive eines Buches. Following on, here's an instrumental preposition. Well, instrumental prepositions are mostly used to express the means or cause by which an action is achieved, showing how or why something happens. And the most important one is Dank, which means thanks to. And here's an example. Dank Ihrer Hilfe haben wir das Projekt abgeschlossen. Thanks to her help, we finished the project. First, we have Dank, which means thanks to, and it is followed by Ihrer Hilfe, which is the genitive case of Ihre Hilfe. Now, we're going to talk about a concessive preposition, and concessive prepositions are generally used to indicate contrast or exception, highlighting that an action occurs despite certain conditions or obstacles. The most important one is trotz, which means despite. And here's an example with trotz. Trotz des schlechten Wetters gingen wir spazieren. Despite the bad weather, we went for a walk. First, we have the preposition trotz, which means despite. and it is followed right away by the genitive case des schlechten Wetters. Following on, the last prepositions we're going to talk about are prepositions of place, and four are very important to remember. First one, we have außerhalb, which means outside of. Hier ist ein example. Außerhalb der Stadt gibt es viele Felder. Outside of the city, there are many fields. First, we have the preposition außerhalb, which means outside of, and it is followed by the genitive der Stadt. Now, in this case, but also for every example we talked about, it is also very important to notice that there was always a comma between the two parts of the sentences in English. But in German, because it all belongs to the same sentence, there's no need for a comma between außerhalb der Stadt and gibt es viele Felder. So that is also important to remember. Now, moving on, we have innerhalb, which means inside of. And here's an example. Innerhalb des Hauses ist es schön warm. Inside of the house, it is nicely warm. Where innerhalb is the preposition of place inside of, which requires the dative des Hauses. Now the next one is jenseits, which means beyond. And the example is jenseits des Flusses liegt ein Wald. Beyond the river, there is a forest. First we have jenseits, which means beyond, which is followed by the genitive des Flusses. And finally, the last preposition, inmitten, which means in the middle of. And the example is simply, inmitten des Parks steht eine Statue. In the middle of the park, there's a statue. Firstly, the sentence is starting with the preposition inmitten, which means in the middle of, and it is followed by the genitive des Parks, which would be normally der Park, but because we have to decline it to the genitive case, we're going to write des Parks. Now, use a table with the most important genitive prepositions in German we talked about today. 13 prepositions. Please learn them all because they're very important, not only for the writing exam, but especially for your speaking exam where you're going to express yourself. By using these prepositions, you're going to be able to use a more variable language, which is going to be better, which is going to increase your grade, and which is going to also increase your language capabilities. So they are very important. And I hope you understood everything. If you do not have any questions about the topic, here's some exercises. Please try to insert the prepositions correctly and write in the comments your solutions so that I can correct them and so that you can know whether you understood the topic or not. The prepositions you can insert are the ones we talked about today. And so please try to first understand the meaning of the sentence and then try to add the prepositions. Well, other than that, thanks for your attention and I wish you a nice day.